It's about 3 p.m. Pacific time on Easter Sunday, April 20th. And a couple of days ago, I went to a webinar hosted by Big Tent USA, and there were two really important speakers there. The first was Professor Joyce Vance. She is a law professor in Alabama. She's also a host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast, and she's a frequent contributor on, I think, MSNBC and a number of other news sites. The other guest was attorney Marc Elias from Democracy Docket. He has been tirelessly fighting the Trump regime for years in the courts. And his organization does so much behind the scenes, especially on a state level, to defend the rule of law and free and fair elections. You should follow him on Blue Sky immediately. Also, he's a frequent guest on Brian Tyler Cohen as well. So Big Tent is an organization that is committed to defending democratic values, the Constitution, and the rule of law, and they seek to empower the public with facts, guidance, and calls to action. And I want to share a little bit with you about what Joyce and Marc had to say in that call. I'm not going to lie, it's dark times, y'all, and neither Marc nor Joyce were willing to sugarcoat any of what they had to say. But they are experts in this field, and I think their opinion carries a lot of weight, and we really need to listen to what they have to say. Joyce started off by saying, "We're in a constitutional crisis when the branches of government cannot resolve their own conflict." Marc said, "There are times when the courts and the executive don't necessarily agree, but they're wrestling through it. They're working it out." He said he's worried that we are now in a place where the courts have ordered something and the executive is saying, "Go pound sand." This week really kicked off a constitutional crisis. Marc said, when we look back in history, we will say that this week in the United States is when the constitutional crisis began. Joyce made a really good point. She said, it's not like the stock market being opened in the morning. Nobody's going to stand there and ring a big bell and say, constitutional crisis has started. That's not how it happens. Nobody's going to officially declare it for all of us. We know it when we see it, and Trump has no intention of avoiding a constitutional crisis. Pam Bondi is trying to dirty up Abrego Garcia. The official White House Twitter has as well. I've said this before, but they know that what they're doing is so deeply unpopular. They know that Americans know it's a violation of due process, that they are desperate to smear Abrego Garcia as a gang member, as a violent thug, when there's no evidence to that fact. And in fact, the DOJ has signed in sworn court documents that they know he's not one. Pam Bondi outright lied in a news interview where she said that 2 courts have already said that he is a member of MS-13. That is the opposite of what those courts ruled. But as Joyce said, it's not about whether somebody is crooked or they're a saint, whether they are a criminal or they have done nothing wrong. Everybody is entitled to due process. We can't determine if you're a criminal or not without due process. So she said, it is deeply concerning to see the Attorney General, who is supposed to be the AG for the American people, but she is serving as Trump's private AG, disavowing due process in a Fox News interview last week. She's supposed to be independent, and she's not. She just works for Trump. Joyce said what is so concerning about this, and I completely agree, that there is no recognition that a human being's life is at stake. They are using people to settle political scores. She said it filled her with enormous sadness to watch that exchange between Trump and Bukele in the White House. Everybody there knows that Abrego Garcia is innocent. They are destroying his life, and they do not care. They will destroy your life and your neighbor's life and your son's life and my life, and they won't care. Marc said that White House meeting between Trump and Bukele, it looked like college kids in a frat house joking about stealing another school's mascot. Stephen Miller freely gave opinions about Supreme Court rulings, and he's not even an attorney. Why was Pam Bondi there? Marc doesn't know. It's inappropriate for the Attorney General to be in a spectacle like that. 2 dictators yucking it up at the expense of Abrego Garcia and his family. It showed the absolute depth of cruelty of this regime. They take pleasure in causing harm. They're not indifferent. They enjoy the cruelty of what they're doing. They enjoy hurting an innocent man, depriving him of his freedom. Joyce expounded on the cruelty of this regime. She referenced an interview that I've talked about where Pam Bondi said that Abrego Garcia's wife and child would be better off without him. And she referred to his wife, Jennifer, as that woman, rather than calling her by name. She said, when you hear how the Attorney General is talking about these human beings, we are perilously close to where we treat people as something other than fully human. That is a dangerous and disturbing moment. Joyce went on to use this phrase that is so perfectly descriptive of what Congress is doing. She said, Congress is supine. They have rolled over and they have given up all of their power to this dictator. The thing I keep reminding folks is that Republicans in Congress could stop this nightmare at any point in time through impeachment and removal. They could impeach Trump. They could impeach J.D. Vance. They could impeach the Speaker of the House. They have all committed impeachable offenses, but they are choosing not to. They are sitting on their hands, or they are actively supporting this regime. They are collaborators with fascists. They are fascists. They're actively contributing to the destruction of democracy because they could stop this at any time, but they're choosing to be supine. Joyce spoke about the greater issue of the American public losing all trust in the Department of Justice while it is being weaponized by Trump for his petty revenge and to destroy due process. She said, the public trust is like a reservoir. It takes forever to build up trust and integrity. You have to slowly build that reservoir over time. But someone can come along and stab a hole in the liner, right? And it all drains out very quickly. She said that's what the DOJ under Pam Bondi is doing. They are bleeding their integrity. She said we are seeing the loss of a functioning Justice Department, and she doesn't know how that trust is going to be rebuilt. I mean, I would argue that Justice Department started bleeding integrity under Merrick Garland. But Pam Bondi has opened its wrists, right? They went on to talk about Trump's comments about how he wants Bukele to build more of these torture prisons in El Salvador so that he can ship homegrowns there. That is an absolute violation of the 8th Amendment under the Cruel and Unusual Punishment Clause. By any measure, CCOT violates the 8th Amendment. But Joyce was saying they're using this cagey approach to the Venezuelans and Abrego Garcia that they've shipped down there. Well, they're in this prison, and that's El Salvador's jurisdiction, so we can't do anything. And they now want to do that with Americans. They want to disappear us down there. The thing is that they do have control. It's a private prison, and Donald Trump has hired that prison. He is paying them to keep people. They're paying them with our millions of our tax dollars. And now he has publicly said he wants to use our tax dollars to disappear Americans down there to a torture gulag. Joyce said she and others are worried that they want to make deals with red states who have overcrowded state prison systems and ship criminals from those states down to El Salvador. She said, Trump keeps pushing this message of we just want to get rid of the violent criminals. But do you notice who they're actually starting with? We have no proof the Venezuelan men at all, no proof at all, because they've been denied due process, are gang members. But look at who else they're targeting. It's college students. College students accused of no crimes. Those are the folks who are being rounded up in the middle of the night, stuck in detention centers. They've committed no crimes. They are here legally. Joyce said, and I quote, "We are at the point where the unthinkable has to be contemplated as something that they might do." Marc said it's not even 100 days into this regime, and we have green card holders being targeted. We've had American citizens who've been rounded up. An American citizen in Arizona was held for 10 days in an ICE facility. We just saw ICE in Florida imprison an American citizen and tried to claim that a judge couldn't free him, even though his mother produced his birth certificate. Marc said it is very, very worrying that we have crossed a line from lawfully removing people who are not legally in the United States to unlawfully removing people who are legally here. If there is no public outcry, and if the rule is once he gets you out of the US, there is simply no recourse, there is no limiting principle here. If they can get their hands on you and they can ship you out of the US, under their theory, there's nothing you can do about it. Marc then went on to talk about how concentration camps started as work camps in 1933-34. They rounded up people, shipped them out of the country for years before they started exterminating them. We are only 100 days into this. What will happen in the next 100 days and the 100 days after that? The courts are only going to be one check. We have to use other tools in our arsenal. He urged everybody to contact Congress. Joyce added, it will have to be the people and the courts working together, and we'd better get ready because it's going to be a rough ride. Okay, that's some heavy stuff from two people who know what they're talking about. I'm sorry to have to put that on y'all, but we cannot be hiding our heads in the sand about the severity of what this regime is doing. We have got to mobilize immediately. Time is of the essence. As Marc said, they've done all of this in only 100 days. What is the next 100 days going to bring if we don't stop this? I want to talk about the second half of their webinar, but I'll do that in the next video. But we've got to get to work, y'all. We need some radical acceptance about what is going to be asked of us, what is being asked of us right now. It sucks, but this is where we are. And we have no other choice but to act. Because I will keep saying it, we cannot let the future belong to Donald Trump. It must belong to us, the American people. This is our country. These are our lives. This is our freedom. The future is ours, but we must step in and secure that right to decide what happens here next. Okay, part 2 of my takeaways from the Big Tent USA webinar I attended the end of last week with law school professor Joyce Vance and attorney Marc Elias from Democracy Docket. In the second half, Joyce and Marc discussed the SAVE Act. Loads of us have been sounding the alarm about this voter suppression bill, which has already passed the House and now goes on to the Senate. It is crucial that Democrats in the Senate filibuster this bill. It is also crucial that every last one of us be contacting our senators. I don't care what their party affiliation is. This cannot pass. Now, we know that the details of the SAVE Act are being falsely represented by conservative news outlets such as Fox News. Republican electeds are misrepresenting what is in the bill as well. I mean, we even saw Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez from Washington State, who's a Democrat, vote yes for the bill because she said she cares very much about making sure that illegal immigrants don't get to vote. She acknowledged the bill was really bad, and she knows it won't pass the Senate because it will get filibustered. She knew this bill was going to disenfranchise millions of voters, mostly women, but she voted for it anyway because she was pandering to the Republicans in her purple district. We don't have a problem in the US with illegal immigrants, with non-citizens voting. That's not a thing that happens here. Our elections are very secure. You already have to prove that you're an American citizen when you register to vote. The SAVE Act is particularly pernicious and frightening because it's not about making sure that only American citizens and every American citizen who's eligible gets to vote. It's about suppressing the votes of millions and millions and millions of Americans. Marc said, "This is just the latest Republican voter suppression bill." Republicans love their voter suppression bills, and there are three main ways they can work to suppress the vote. They can limit who can register, they can limit who is able to vote, and they can limit whose vote actually gets counted. We've seen that a lot lately with Republicans filing suits to have military votes thrown out, to have all kinds of technicalities that when people are legally registered to vote, that their vote can't be counted. Trump's voter suppression executive order targets all three of those, but the SAVE Act primarily focuses on the first one, who can even register to vote. The targeted tactics in the bill aim to decrease voter registration amongst Black and brown voters, young first-time voters, and women voters. Do you know why? Because all of those demographics skew Democratic. Republicans don't do well amongst those populations, so they have a profound incentive to target the conditions that make it easier for those folks to register to vote. Marc said back in 2013, remember, this is when Republicans were the Mitt Romney-style Republicans. In 2013, Republicans pushed through a North Carolina voter suppression law that was eventually overturned. It was illegal because it, quote, targeted African American voters with laser precision in an attempt to disenfranchise them from voting because Republicans can't win unless they suppress the vote. They intentionally put provisions in that bill that would have the greatest impact on Black voters. That was back in 2013, and think how much more precisely they can unpack voter data, demographics, look at trends in certain populations, and use that to craft bills that suppress the votes of people who don't want to support the party of Donald Trump. So the biggest impact of the SAVE Act will be to disenfranchise millions and millions of women voters. That's not an incidental effect of the bill, right? The bill is not about making sure that non-Americans can't vote. And whoopsie, because we're protecting the vote from non-Americans, all of these women are going to be disenfranchised as well. No, the primary goal of the bill is to disenfranchise millions of women from voting. Because again, non-Americans already do not vote in our elections. Republicans who crafted this bill, they know what populations have passports. That is knowable info. They know which populations are more likely to have a certified birth certificate on hand. But it's scarier than that because what did Trump say about birth certificates? It's not really about cost and convenience here, right? We know that the SAVE Act is a poll tax because if you have to get your passport, you're going to spend at least $130, if not $190 to get a passport that you will have to take to a voter registration office and present in person to register to vote now. Get out the vote movements, online registration, mail-in registration, those will all be illegal under the SAVE Act. But that's not the most insidious part of this. What did Trump say about birth certificates? He said Obama's wasn't real. The state of Hawaii had to make a statement, this is a valid birth certificate that we have issued. Barack Obama is a US citizen. This is a real birth certificate. And Trump still says it wasn't real and wasn't valid. What was Trump's first big executive order? Attacking birthright citizenship. If he wins that, a birth certificate is no longer valid proof that you are a US citizen. The reason that a birth certificate is conclusive proof of citizenship is because we have birthright citizenship. So if Trump wins his birthright citizenship case, if we no longer have a birth certificate as proof of US citizenship, If Trump can say, I think your citizenship isn't valid because I say your birth certificate isn't valid, I don't care what the state says, then only a passport will work as proof for voting. And if you don't already have a passport, what do you need to get one? A birth certificate. So you'll only be able to use your passport to register to vote. And then Marc said, it gets even worse than that. The Trump regime is going to try to cancel passports. They are already canceling people's visas with no reason, and they have already moved on to canceling green cards with no reason, revoking permanent resident status. First visas, then legal residence, then permanent residence. You think passports aren't next? They will find a reason to revoke your passport if they want to. Joyce then said, we're really lucky to have Marc to explain the trajectory of what this regime intends to do, to understand how to connect the dots, and to look at what's going to happen next based on what has happened historically in other authoritarian regimes. She said, Republicans are not new to voter fraud. This is their modus operandi and has been for at least 2 decades. What's different now is that they used to try and do voter suppression on a state level, and now Trump is taking it to a national level. Trump loves to cry voter fraud, but we don't have voter fraud. We don't have non-Americans voting. What we do have is huge problems with voter suppression in this country. Trump will stop at nothing to keep people who won't vote for him from being able to vote at all. Joyce referenced citizens at town halls who are asking their Republican electeds, will this impact my husband or just me? And the answer is just you, women. It's just you. They want to keep those uppity women from voting, is what Joyce said, because women skew Democratic. Marc said there are only 2 real checks on Donald Trump right now, the courts and the elections, because Congress will not do its goddamn job, right? And Trump fears elections. To be in Trump's orbit, to be in office with him this term, you must be an election denier. There is nobody close to him who is not an election denier. You cannot believe in the concept of free and fair elections and work in the Trump regime. He won't let you. He fears free and fair elections, so he surrounds himself with election deniers. The critical thing for him to advance his authoritarian impulses is to destroy free and fair elections. But more than that, to destroy your belief in them, to get you to be apathetic and not participate in elections. Joyce went on to say, one of the most powerful acts of protest that the American people have right now is to vote. It may be harder in the coming years. The Trump regime is doing everything they can to make it harder for us to vote. And so voting becomes an act of resistance. If you can afford it, get a passport. Yes, it's a poll tax, but pay it. Pay it for somebody that you know and care about. Sign up to be a poll watcher. Sign up to be an election worker. Be a positive force for upcoming elections. Work with get out the vote movements. If election suppression bills get turned into law, then we need to work to counteract them and make sure that everybody gets their right to vote. Marc said, we will have elections in 2026. All of this talk of like there won't be any elections in 2026 is bull. It's meant to make you apathetic. It's meant to make you give up on being able to defeat Trump and his regime through voting. But we know that we've got to get those Republicans out of Congress. And 2026 is the best way to regain the House and the Senate and reinstitute checks and balances against the executive. Do not assume that there's nothing you can do. Do not assume that the election is rigged. He wants you to feel powerless and to not bother to vote. It is crucial right now that we organize with our friends, make sure that folks in our circle all have proper ID and they do the affirmative steps to be able to vote, that we do not cede our power in advance. Joyce concluded by saying that giving up is unforgivable. If it is harder to vote in the coming years, we must redouble our efforts to make sure that people have access to the vote and that we have massive turnout. I know that we're all really tired, y'all. I know that this regime is draining us of our resources, of our energy, but we cannot let them drain us of our motivation. That is how they win. Giving up is unforgivable. We must use the tools at our disposal. We cannot be apathetic. We cannot cede power to Trump. We cannot see the future of our democracy to Donald Trump, to J.D. Vance. The future is ours, and we must continue to vote and make sure that our right to vote, our ability to vote is protected. And if it is under threat, then we make sure that everybody gets their chance so that we can flip the House and the Senate in 2026, so that we can reinstitute checks and balances. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We've got to play the long game. We've got to make sure that we are pressuring Democrats to filibuster the SAVE Act now, that we're letting Republicans in the Senate know we will vote them out if they pass it, and then we've got to look at how do we turn out the vote if it does pass. That's the reality of where we're at right now. These are hard battles, but they are worth fighting.